Hi, listeners. This is Deborah from LEMAIRE SOULCRAFTS, and I am here today with Georgina from Anina Therapy, who is a quantum healing hypnosis therapist, also known as QHHT. Welcome, everyone, to Mystical Tea Time, where we drink tea and talk about all things ascension and spirituality. And today we're going to be talking about QHHT, Dolores Cannon, spiritual awakening in general, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. For those who know me, welcome back. And for those who are new, my name is Deborah, and I'm a multi-dimensional channel, intuitive mentor, and artist. And if you want to stay up to date on all the podcast episodes, make sure to go to anchor.fm/mystical tea time, and there you can find all available podcast links, or you can just subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Instagram. Okay, so here we are with Georgina, and she's a QHHT practitioner, therapist. And for those who don't know what QHHT is, it's quantum healing hypnosis therapy, right? Or technique?
Yeah, technique. Quantum healing hypnosis technique is like the official title.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually a little bit obsessed with QHHT. I bumped into Dolores Cannon's work around 2017.
Me too.
And yeah, I read all her books, and I just loved all of her books. I loved every single book of hers, and I've listened to a lot of her. She had her own podcast, The Metaphysical Hour, and I listened to a lot of those episodes and just a lot of her seminars, and I just loved her whole vibe. She was really amazing.
Incredible human being, absolutely incredible lady. Yeah, I have a big picture, a big photograph of her in my studio, and I always light a candle in front of her photograph before we start working, so I know that she's with me. So yeah, she's a really special person.
Yeah, I really believe that she's still watching over all of the QHHT practitioners. She's still keeping an eye on everyone, and I'm pretty sure that she's really proud of everything that it's become ever since she started it, because it really started small and now it's this global thing. It's really established, and people, when in the spiritual community, when you say QHHT, most people know what that is. They know Dolores Cannon, they know quantum healing hypnosis, they know about it.
Yeah, it is. But there are only 225,000 of us in the whole world. So when you think about the number of billions of people there are in the world, there's 225,000 qualified QHHT practitioners. So it's grown a lot, but there are still not huge amounts of people out there doing it, which is something I think will change. You know, the more people become educated around what QHHT is and what an absolutely phenomenal treatment it is, it will just, I feel like it will continue to grow for sure.
Yes, because what I love about it is that it kind of blends spirituality and science, because hypnosis is actually a science. It's like supported by medicine. The medical field is starting to support hypnosis. They're starting to look into it. And then you have Dolores herself really like started researching. Like, she had her clients, and they would say stuff, and she would go into the library and she would check up on their stories. She would go and find evidence. That's what I love about her.
Yeah, exactly. And also, she was such a curious person, naturally very curious. So when she discovered that she could kind of connect with the soul and go back and explore long-term past memories, when you read about it, it feels as though it was just meant to be for her, because she's such a curious person. She's one of those people who finds it very easy to think of a question very quickly and then explore it. And that nature is what's led her to the level of work that she eventually ended up implementing. So yeah, amazing woman, amazing.
Yeah, what I thought was really amazing was in the Nostradamus books that Nostradamus said that, yeah, I've been waiting to find like a suitable person to communicate with, and she was that person.
Yeah, yeah.
Because she understood the quantum level of communication that they were actually having across time zones, like because he was in, I don't know, the 15th century and she was in our time, or in the 80s. I don't know when the book was written, in the 80s. I think it was when they had the sessions, and they understood that they were talking that without time. There was no such thing as time.
Yeah, and she was originally, when she first connected with him, I believe she was working with one particular client, and she did some sessions with that particular client, and then that client moved, which Dolores.
Oh yes, I remember. Yeah.
This lady moved away, and she was concerned that she was no longer going to have this connection with him. And he said to her, "No, I can come through any of your clients now. We've got this." It was almost like a telephone line. She had the personal telephone number of Nostradamus.
Yeah.
And kind of like connect with him through any of her clients. So he made pretty sure that she got all the information that she needed to get. And, some of it kind of blows my mind, but a lot of the time I just think, well, yeah, why not? It seems like if something needs to be understood, and it needs to be understood in a particular time zone, whatever needs to happen to bring that information to the forefront is what happens. And, the universe takes care of these things that people need to know and people need to find out about. And it becomes something that people are aware of because it's important. So yeah, he definitely took care of that, and it was really interesting how she took apart his little lines that were obviously they were hidden. He had to hide them away because he would have been killed if he'd have been found out for giving out this information, for prophesizing. And he put himself in a really dangerous position. But that's why he wrote the lines in kind of like poetry form. I can't remember what the word is, but they're written in kind of like
quatrains.
Code. That's it. Yeah, that's it. And that and the code was what Dolores had to kind of then unpick. And I remember her speaking about how strict he was with her. He would give her all this information, and then she would be expected to go away and kind of like unpick it all and come back to him. And he was a really, really strict teacher with her as well, which I think was funny.
And he got upset about, like, I remembered, and she said, oh, there are all these books written, and that's how they translated your quatrains. And he got upset. He said, no, they got it all wrong. That he got upset because they got all these different interpretations that were wrong. And he said, we have to fix this. That's why I'm contacting you. We have to fix it because they didn't get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone really needed to understand the truth. And eventually the truth does come out. We know that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love all her books. How did you roll into QHHT? How did that happen?
Well, it's a big question, and it's got a big answer. So you're gonna have to kind of bear with me a little bit. Back towards the end of 2017, I cut my finger open really badly. I was drying a glass tumbler and it cracked, and it cut my finger open very badly. And I knew the moment it happened that I needed to go to hospital, but I'd always had a phobia of hospitals. I was absolutely terrified of hospitals, and not so much the building, but the metal pointed instruments that would be used to cut your skin. It sounds strange, but phobias are always strange. and I was terrified of having my skin cut. So this happened, and my finger was basically hanging off, and my husband said, I've got to take you to the hospital. So I agreed, but to be honest, if there had have been a gun on the kitchen work surface at that moment, I would have rather killed myself than gone to the hospital. I was so terrified. So I got to the hospital and I couldn't be taken care of. I was too frightened. I managed to get in there, but I couldn't let the doctors or the nurses anywhere near me. So after several hours and lots of kind of talking, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be seen. So I got sent home, and I wasn't in a good way at all. But the next day I went to see a doctor that I did know. He was a private doctor who worked from a house rather than a hospital or a doctor's surgery. And I managed to get myself to see him, but he still couldn't sew up my finger, which was what needed to happen. So I had to have it bandaged up, and I went home. And for the next few weeks, I had to just rest because I couldn't go to work because my finger was completely broken. It was just totally shot. And I was in a lot of pain, and I decided that I had to do something about this phobia. And I knew it was a phobia because I had always had it. I'd always felt this way ever since I'd been a child, but I didn't know why. I didn't know where it had come from. And something in me told me, an instinct, an intuition, a guide, told me that this phobia, this fear had come from a past life. And I'd never really looked into past lives, although I've always been a very spiritual person, but past lives wasn't something I'd ever looked at. So I Googled past life regression, and the first thing that came up was QHHT. And I didn't know what it meant, so I started to read through the website, and I just felt as though I understood it. And I didn't know why. There was just something very deep within me that resonated with this work, with this technique. And I could only get so much information off of the QHHT website, but I saw that you could do a course. So I was sitting in bed with this horrible finger that was just so painful, and I needed a distraction. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to download the course. I don't know why, I didn't think about it. It was quite a lot of money, but something before I knew it had happened, and I downloaded this information, and I was reading about it and watching Dolores' videos, and I just felt as though I understood the work, even though I'd never studied it. And then I thought, okay, so I understand what the work is now. I need to find somebody who practices it. And I managed to find a lady in Devon, which is about a 3-hour journey from where I live. And I contacted her and I said, can I set up a session with you? And she said yes. And I had to wait about 3 months because, like I said, there's not many of us around. And I went to see her, and I just had the most incredible experience. And the lives that I was shown provided me with all of the information to other physical and emotional struggles that I'd been experiencing. So before you go to a session, you're always told to bring with you physical and emotional struggles that you want to resolve, release, solve. So I had a list of these things, and within the regression, within the hypnosis, I was shown 4 lives which gave me the answers that I needed in order to understand where these physical and emotional struggles had come from. And in particular, the life that had created the phobia for me around having my skin cut was that I was a beautiful seabird, this amazing white seabird. And in this life, I was flying over the ocean. It was really cold, and towards the edge of the ocean, I could see that the sea had turned into ice. And I was this seabird with these amazing white wings, and I'm flying over the ocean, and I can see a hole in the solid sea, in the ice. And there was a native man sitting next to this hole, in kind of skins, animal skins, and he was fishing, had a rod. And as a seabird, I just decided I'd go and have a look at his fish. And I remember thinking at the time, this is not a good idea. But I did it anyway. And I flew down to this hole in the ice. And the moment I started to make my descent, I knew I was going to die. But I'd made a choice, and it was almost as though, you know, if you've ever had a car accident, the second before it happens, you just get that dragging feeling that you know something terrible is going to happen. It felt like that. So I landed by this hole in the ice, and as I landed, the native fisherman had an ice pick, a long metal sharp ice pick, and he hacked my whole body open. So I could watch it as an observer. The therapist asks you, if you see a traumatic scene, to see the scene as an observer. You don't feel any pain, but you need to experience the scene in order to understand where the emotional attachment for the trauma has come from. So I watched my beautiful seabird body and what lovely wings just being hacked open with this ice pick. And the moment I saw that, I recognized the feeling that my phobia gave me when I was in a hospital, or if I was near sharp medical instruments, and this feeling had the taste of metal came into my mouth, and it was so overwhelming. And in that moment, I knew that's where the phobia had started. So my death had been traumatic, and I hadn't released the trauma of the death because it had been very quick. So when we go back and we experience that kind of trauma in a hypnosis state, just experiencing the trauma, seeing it as an observer, we release all the emotion attached to it, which then means that we can release a phobia or obsessive compulsive disorder or an emotional state of behaving or being, a physical problem that could have come from a previous trauma. So the moment I had that experience, I knew it was gone. And it took a few days for me to process the information. And then I could feel I'd completely changed. The other physical issues that I had an obsessive compulsive disorder, which I saw a life, which gave me the reasons why that existed for me. That has completely gone from my life. Some other physical issues, they went within the matter of days. And I've never, ever had those problems again. And I knew that I had to bring this therapy to my local community, because I'd had to travel 3 hours to see this person to become healed. And I really wanted to make this therapy available to as many people as I could. So I basically came home, studied, spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on free case studies, working with my clients in hypnosis until I got to my level 1, which took me about a year and a half. And that's why I study QHHT, because it changed my life. I 100% believe in it.
Wow, that was an incredible story. Well, not incredible, because I actually believe all of that, because that's the thing. Some people say, like in the spiritual community, they're like, oh, but you can't be an animal and then a human and then an animal again. I don't think there's any order in that or hierarchy. I think you can, if you've been a human, I believe you can choose to be an animal and then be a human again, because I know in like the raw material, the law of one, they say that you can you graduate from being a second density being like an animal to a third density being. But I've heard cases where Dolores says that people chose to be bears, or they chose like to be a bird or an animal, and then they, after that, they choose a lifetime as a human. And in my own Akashic Records work, I've seen beings that were extraterrestrial humanoids, and then they come back as a cat or a dog.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because we have the opportunity to have what Dolores calls a potato life, which is which is basically a very simple life, and we can choose
a potato life. I didn't know she called it that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, she calls the simple lives potato lives.
That's funny.
And because when we've had an experience, it could be off planet, but when we've had a very, very intense life where we've done a lot of soul growth, we've learned a lot of lessons. When we move back to spirit, obviously we get the opportunity to look at our whole life from beginning to end and decide whether we fulfilled our purpose, whether we filled our soul contract. When we go back and we have the opportunity to do more learning in the schools, or we might learn to rest, then we choose the type of life we want to come back and have next time. And it might not be another intense life. In fact, it probably won't be, because we would have done such a lot of soul growing the last time that we might just want to come back and be on the earth to do minimal learning and just have the experience without a lot of attachment to fulfilling big missions. So I believe that, most of my clients that I work with, I will see at least one animal life. And normally what happens is we would have been a community animal before we chose to be a human. So we would have been a bird or a fish. So I see a lot of bird lives and a lot of fish lives, because they're community animals and they learn how to interact with each other, as we have to do as humans. And then the chances are a human life, if that's what was chosen after, would be a very short human life, to get us used to being in a human body, to get us used to the frequency of Earth and what that actually means, because it would be too much for us to come back again and again and again and again and have all these really intense lives. So I believe we can choose when we want to, what we want to be.
So yeah, the animal lives. Yeah, that's really interesting, because when I was a child, I had this dream that I've had, like, that kept coming back, where I was a black panther, like a puma, and I was the animal. Like, I felt that I was the animal. I had the instincts of the panther, and I was running away from a person, and it seemed like it was like a dark-skinned person with like a spear or something, and I was running away, and then they kind of like cornered me, and that's the end of the dream.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, there's I have a lot of past lives that I work with people where they are what you might consider to be an inanimate object. So a lady I worked with the other day was a piece of sand.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. I've worked with people in past lives before where they've been stones or rocks or flowers, have a lot of insects, lots of butterflies. But I've never had a piece of sand before, and it was incredible, because the purpose of that life was for this individual to learn how to observe, which I thought was absolutely beautiful, because she said, well, I can't do much else because I don't have any legs.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's, everything has a soul. So everything that has a soul has had a previous life. And that's what makes this work so interesting. It really does. Every single time I work with a new client, I'm absolutely blown away, not only by the connection of the lives that person's higher self would choose to show them, but just the absolute detail of what the person describes to me. And we're taught as QHHT practitioners to be as curious as Dolores, to ask a lot of questions and to ask the questions very in an open way, so there's no yes or no answer, and it needs a description. But we are also trained to ask questions very quickly, so that, like you've said recently in your new course, that the intuition, the instinct, the higher self will provide the answers very quickly. It's the ego that gets involved and wants to think about it.
Yes.
So when I'm working with clients, I'm asking lots of questions all the time, and the amount of information that I get is just, it's just incredible. I think I could probably write a book soon as well.
Yeah, you probably could, and yeah, it's amazing. Hypnosis. Well, I've never had a QHHT session. I've had regular past life hypnosis sessions, but I know QHHT is different because it's really about healing on all kinds of levels.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what does make it very different. So when I work with clients for between 6 and 7 hours. One session is.
Yeah.
And for the first 3 hours, we basically sit and talk, and we talk about that person's whole life, from their earliest memories up until the current point in their life. And the reason why we have to do that is because I need to understand everything about that person, so that when they're under, I know what I'm looking for. I know what the triggers would be. I know whether an individual in that person's life, that a previous life that's come forward, could be a karmic connection. So I need to understand the very intense relationships that people have in their current lives, so that I recognize a very intense relationship that would be coming up from a past life. And then I can ask the question of the higher self: was this individual in this past life a karmic connection? Does this person know this person in their life now? And the higher self will tell me. So the point of QHHT is to heal. It's not for curiosity's sake. Dolores talks a lot about the questions that people bring to sessions, which are curiosity questions. And of course, we can take a look at those. But normally what I find is somebody will gravitate towards me for a certain thing, which could be out of curiosity. But by the time we've spoken over the phone and I've done a consultation, I would have recognized that there's a whole bunch of things that we can free from their life. So they could have physical issues that they haven't actually brought to me as something they want to resolve, but it will have been the reason why they've come to me. And we resolve the physical issues exactly like I explained in my life. As soon as the subconscious knows that you're ready to release a physical or emotional struggle, it will put everything in place that you need for that to be released, because you're ready, because the time is right, and you're asking to be healed. So going back through past lives, you'll be shown exactly why those physical issues and emotional struggles are existing in your life. And then within the hypnosis, I can heal, and just experiencing where those struggles have come from mean that they just get released from your life very, very gently, very powerfully. But within the space of 6 hours, you will leave me completely healed. And there's very few therapies, I believe, out there that can do that intense, deep work within the space of just 6 hours. There's no follow-ups, there's no homework, you don't have to do anything. All you do need to do is listen to the recording, because the session is recorded. So the guidance is that you listen to the session 3 times. You don't have to listen in one go, because people are in hypnosis between 2 and 3 hours. And so you can just sit and listen to that recording in bits when you feel like you want to. And listening back to the recording means that you get more understanding of what happened in the hypnosis, because you don't remember. People will come round and they'll remember a little bit, like you feel when you've had a really amazing dream, and you think, oh God, that was an amazing dream. When I get up, I'm going to tell my husband. And by the time you've been to the bathroom and made a cup of tea, you've completely forgotten that amazing dream. So the hypnosis is kind of like that. When people come around, they have some memories, but then they fade. So the whole session's recorded, and then they have that session recording for the rest of their lives to go back and listen to and get more understanding from. And every time they listen to it, they get additional healing as well. And the subconscious, I always ask for the subconscious, the higher self, to continue healing that night when the person sleeps. So it is all about healing. It's about creating shifts and transformations, and it's exactly what it does.
Yeah, so basically when they're listening to the recording, they're integrating more and more of what came through during the session. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly what happens. Exactly that. And sometimes I don't always understand 100% why parts of that life could have been shown to that person, because there could be some information in that particular past life that hasn't connected with a thought pattern of mine, because perhaps that client chose not to share some things with me when we did the interview, when we did the 3-hour chat. But for them, listening back to the recording, they might find additional understanding that perhaps I wouldn't be able to connect. So it's a big part of the kind of follow-up, but it's not a chore. It's not really homework. It's just additional understanding.
yeah. Well, I'm blown away. Yeah, the way you explain it, yeah, you were made for this work. Just how you talk about it, you sound so passionate. And yeah, if anyone that is in where are you again, in the UK?
So I'm in Brighton. I'm on the south coast. I'm actually in a place called Southwick, which is a little village 10 minutes outside of Brighton City. And I have my studio here. It's a lovely big wooden studio in my garden, which is called the Sanctuary. It's an amazing place. We've got squirrels and birds. And in fact, I have this squirrel who, whenever I start working with somebody in hypnosis, he could be running around the garden. The second I start to put the person under, he comes and sits on the roof just above where the bed is, where the person is, and just moves backwards and forwards for almost the entire 3 hours. It's very interesting. I think he likes the energy.
I think maybe he's assisting in some way. He might be assisting with the energy somehow. Wow, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah, I've told you before, whenever I'm in the UK, whenever the COVID rules, like if I ever visit the UK, I definitely need to have a QHHT session with you, because I've had past life regressions and they were amazing, but I still haven't experienced the QHHT session, and I love Dolores Cannon. I love the entire concept of QHHT, so yeah, I need to definitely come visit you.
I would love to work with you. I really would. And obviously, recently, because of the Akashic Blueprint reading that you did for me, which absolutely blew my mind and has changed my life a lot, understanding from that reading that I have actually practiced vibrational frequency healing via the voice for many, many lifetimes, has really helped me to understand in this life why I have resonated with QHHT so much, and why I know that this is a really important part of this life for me. I really understand that it was my purpose to come here and to continue healing people in this way. And as we both know, I work with a really, really powerful Cassiopean guide called Shannara. And we work together in the sessions So as you described to me, we work in kind of like this triangle
Yeah.
of energy. And when I'm working in hypnosis, I use a specific voice. It's not the voice that I use now. And when I'm working, I channel her voice through my voice. So when people are receiving QHHT therapy with me, they're not only receiving the technique and the skill that Dolores has passed on to us as practitioners, they're receiving very, very powerful off-planet vibrational healing as well, which is incredible in itself.
Yeah, yeah, because I think a lot of the practitioners, they may not even realize how supported they are and that they're actually channeling. Because
Yeah.
I really believe from your reading, I learn a lot from each reading I do for a person. I learn new and different things. It's amazing. And like your reading, I learned so much from just doing a reading for you, because I was given insight in what it's like to be a hypnotherapist and how it works. They were, because your guide basically showed me how it works, and energetically the frequencies, how everything is connected. So yeah, I think when you're a hypnotherapist or a QHHT practitioner, you are a channel and you have these techniques, but you have this whole team of light that is speaking through you, because you are basically like the person in control of everything here on earth, but you have this whole team in the sky that is backing you up, that is working through you, and that is amazing.
Yeah, I now have like a little nickname for her. I call her my spiritual sidekick. And before I work with any client, I always meditate before I work and just connect with their energies and get guidance on what I need to get guidance on for that particular session. And during my meditation, now I'm always connected to Shannara, and she always gives me guidance around points during the session where I might need to surrender a little bit more to her guidance, and that's exactly what happens. So I don't ever now feel as though I'm working on my own, which is just incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the same way with me. I feel like the more I started opening up to all the different spirit guides that I had, the more I realized that when I connect to the Akashic records, I'm assisted by a bunch of different spirit guides that are helping me in adjusting my energy, and yeah, it depends too on who I'm connecting with. Different spirit guides will come forward that are like better attuned to that specific frequency that I'm working with at the time. Yeah, we're and just people in everyday life, we all have spirit guides. We are all supported, and yeah, more and more people are waking up to the knowledge that they have all this support, and I'm just really excited about the future, that people are going to be realizing that they've had past lives, that they have all kinds of invisible helpers, and that they can heal through hypnosis, that they can heal on deeper levels, and that just going to the doctor and treating a symptom isn't gonna be a permanent solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I'd like to say to that actually is that you don't have to be an overly spiritual person in order to have a QHHT session. So you don't have to have a particular spiritual way of thinking. All you need to be is open-minded to the work, because I think it's important for people to understand that there doesn't have to be a strict belief system attached to doing this work. So if somebody is suffering with, for example, so I worked with a guy recently who'd had severe migraines for 10 years, and he has conventional medicine, unfortunately, had let him down. And he was really, really struggling. Very, very frequent severe migraine attacks, which brought with them a change in personality, which was interesting. And I worked with this guy about 6 weeks ago, and I met up with him last week because he wanted to meet me face to face to tell me he is completely healed. He's totally different. For the first time in 10 years, he feels as though he's got his life back. And although he had a kind of mild spiritual belief system, it wasn't a huge part of his life at all, but he was very open-minded to the idea that there had to be something out there to help him. He was at the end of his tether. He didn't know what else to do. He'd had surgeons looking into his head and had all these brain scans, and nothing was found. And so he reached out to an alternative because he was at the end of his tether, and reaching out and being open to the idea that something alternative can work was what it needed to be. You know, he is now healed. So I just would like people to understand that the work is, you said.
My camera works again. Okay.
The work is science-based. So I work in the level of relaxation, which is called the theta level. And there's not many hypnosis therapists that work at this level. It's a different level of hypnosis to the level that you would experience if you went for releasing a habit like smoking or something like that. The theta level is where you are at twice a day. So it's a natural space, just before you go to sleep and just before you wake up. So that's what I take somebody into. So like you said, the science around hypnosis, which is what helps to make it work because it's science-based, but then everything else, the energy, the moving into the quantum dimension, that all sounds a bit kind of cosmic for some people, and I kind of like people not to be put off by the idea of it being ultra spiritual or ultra cosmic if they just need to get better, because it can, you know, they don't need to believe it. It doesn't matter if they believe it or not, it will work. They just need to be open-minded to give it a go.
Yeah, and that's what Dolores said in her books too. Some of these people approach her and they're like, oh, it's not going to work on me, blah, blah, blah. I can't be hypnotized. It's not going to work. And then they end up being somnambulists, and they're like one of the best people to go into hypnosis, and they have these incredible past lives.
Yeah. See, one of the first questions people always ask me is, can everyone be hypnotized? And I will say yes, because it's true. You know, it is. Anyone can be hypnotized. Even people who struggle with control, you know, they can still be hypnotized. And Dolores was, she would never give up with the client the same way as none of us would as practitioners. So people come to us for a reason, and we need to honor that reason. And honoring that reason means healing them. So, yeah.
I remember in one of her books, she had this little office somewhere, and there was something wrong with the plumbing, and then it started like leaking water all over the floor while she was in the middle of a session with somebody, and then they ended up, she brought the person out of hypnosis, and they went to another location, and then they continued the session. She was really dedicated to her work.
Yeah, well, I take people to the toilet during hypnosis. So because they'll be under for like a few hours, and they normally have drinking water when we're talking, and although I invite them to use the bathroom, sometimes they need to use the bathroom in the middle of a hypnosis session. So I don't bring them out. I keep them in trance. I guide them to the bathroom. They use the bathroom, and then I bring them back, and they go straight back into a past life.
Yeah, so, I've seen. Do you know Alba Weinman?
Yeah.
Yeah, she does that too. She has her sessions on YouTube, and then this person is like, they're laying down on the bed, and they're like, I have to use the restroom. Okay, yeah, and then they're back. They go lay down again, and floops, they're back in hypnosis like that.
Yeah, yeah. It is incredible. It is incredible. And then, you know, they're still in trance. They're still under until you bring them out. And Dolores created this script that works perfectly, we can't deviate from it. We have to learn every single word, and we can't change it in any way because we don't need to. And the script has been created in such an amazing way that there's a lot of emphasis put on the protection of the client. So people often ask me, if I have a traumatic experience when I'm under, will I feel that way when I come out? And I'll say, no, absolutely not, because Dolores created the perfect script, which means that any entities, any past lives that you experience when you're under will be left behind. They're left in the past and they stay in the past. And so the script has been created perfectly so that when you're bringing the client out, that's exactly what happens. They actually feel amazing straight afterwards, because that's what we tell them they're going to feel.
Yeah, you're already putting the suggestion out there, and then when they wake up, there's no other option because that's the energy that you've put out there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love everything about QHHT, so I definitely have to get a session at some point in my life.
Definitely come to me. I'd love to work with you.
Yeah, because I know you, and I know, because I've done an Akashic Records reading for you, I know what I will be getting into when I work with you, and I know that would be a really high quality service.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's definitely something I need to do that at some point. I have to take a plane and come visit you.
I think everyone should do it at least once in their life because it changes your perspective. Something I always like, an analogy I like to use for people is that it's like being given puzzle pieces. So up until this point in your life, so for example, I'm nearly 50, up until I was, when did I have my reading? 45, I understood certain things about myself, but there was always things that I didn't understand. And having that QHHT session gave me all of the puzzle pieces, or a good number of puzzle pieces, that I felt up until that point I'd been missing. And I say that to people a lot. It's almost as though you get your own backstory. And that's really, really important, because we can often feel as though we don't understand ourselves on different levels. Why does that trigger me? Why does that person upset me? Why do I find this situation difficult to deal with? And it'll often be information, lives, experiences that you've had in the past that you learned from. And going back and experiencing those lives and doing the learning means that you understand so much more about yourself. And it's such a real comforting feeling. It's as though somebody's just gone, oh, here you go, there's a load of stuff that really explain yourself to you. And I really do feel like, everyone should have that opportunity at least once in their lives.
Yeah, because what I do Akashic Records readings, and then I tell people too, it feels like I give them a piece of the puzzle, but it's still different because I am seeing all of these, I'm seeing it like a film, basically. This, like, when what happens is I kind of project myself out into space. That's what happens. And it's like I'm walking through this tunnel, and I see all these scenes play out of this person's soul, the history of their soul. And I see everything, and then I channel and I start typing, but it's their higher self that is typing the whole story. And I get to see everything, and I try to describe it the best way I can so that they can visualize everything, but it's still different from actually going into hypnosis and seeing it for yourself.
Yeah, but your reading, the reading that you did for me recently was just utterly incredible, and I think you do an amazing job of describing what that person needs to understand. I think it is incredible, and you obviously, when you're channeling, then you get the words specifically from those guides, and it's really, really powerful. But it is different. Yeah, it's very different to kind of experiencing that for yourself. And I think people often get quite worried about what that's going to feel like. is being in hypnosis and seeing my past lives. What will that feel like for me? And it's a hard one to describe because nowadays we're so bombarded with high stimulation stuff, you know, movies that are fast paced, and everything is so overstimulated. But when you're in hypnosis, I always say to people, don't expect it to look like a movie, because it won't. It'll be more like dreaming. It's very, you're immersed in the experience. You feel every emotion in that life, every single emotion in that life. And it's almost like a knowing. And for most people, it's very visual. You know, I will ask them when they first move into a space, once we've sort of orientated them in where they are in their first life, I'll drop them into a scene and we'll talk about what's around them. And then I'll ask them to take a look at their feet. What are they wearing on their feet? They describe what they're wearing on their feet. If they've got feet, if they're a piece of sand, obviously they don't have feet. And then they'll describe their clothing to me, and everything will be described in such detail because that's what they're visually seeing. And it is a hard thing to describe to people. And I always just say there's 3 things that make this experience so easy for you. The first thing is just visualize whatever I ask you to visualize in as much detail as possible. The second thing is to describe to me what you're seeing, the very first thing that comes into your mind. Don't question it. The first thing will be what's correct. The more you describe what you're seeing, the clearer the picture becomes. And that's all they have to do. Just talk about it. And once they're, after a couple of minutes of being in the hypnosis and they're in this space and they're experiencing what they're experiencing, it just becomes second nature, and there's no questioning over whether they're a piece of sand or whether they're a squirrel in a tree. You know?
Yeah, that's what surprised me the most. I had my first past life regression when I was 18, so I had no idea what to expect. I was 18. And I remember, like, it had this staircase, like you have to go down the staircase or something, or up, I can't remember, to go to the past life. And then the door opens or something, and then suddenly that's your past life. And I remember, like, I wasn't expecting anything. I didn't know what to expect. And I saw carriages and horses. And then I had to look at my feet, and I saw these boots, these knee-length boots, like all laced up with like shoelaces, and these like Victorian dresses and stuff. And I'm like, okay, and it was all in such detail. I could describe what it looked like, and I was just like, wow, I can see all this stuff, and it's detailed. And I see people with like Victorian clothing, horses, and then I got in one of the carriages, and all this stuff. Like, okay, I'm really seeing all of this. I was surprised at how easy it was for me to see all of that stuff.
Yeah, it is really, really easy. It is so easy. And that's why I say to people, you know, you don't need to be nervous at all. The reason why people feel slightly anxious, and that doesn't last very long, by the time I've made them a cup of tea and they're sitting with me and we're talking, the anxiety has completely, you know, vanished. But the reason people do feel slightly anxious is because it's something different. You know, how many people have had this opportunity? It's just because it's new. It's just because it's a little bit left field. I don't know why, but it is. And, you know, I think people get worried about stuff that is not common. But just because it's not common doesn't mean to say it doesn't work, because it does.
Yeah, it really does. And yeah, and like you said before, you have like the potato lives.
You like that, don't you?
Yeah, because where did I hear somebody else called it buffer lifetimes. Okay, like in between that you get to like recharge and just recover. And that very first lifetime that I saw when I was 18, that was like a typical potato lifetime, I guess. was really like nice, no, and just effortless, and no traumatic experiences, just a nice lifetime. And I was a botanical illustrator, so
Okay.
still I was artistic like I am in this lifetime. And I was like, I had a big garden with all kinds of plants and flowers, and I was like drawing them and painting them. And I was married to the mayor.
Oh.
And now my last name is Lemaire, and that's French for mayor.
Oh my God, so weird.
Yeah, but that happens too. Like, you have things in this lifetime that refer to past lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I worked with a lady recently, or actually the beginning of the year, and we discovered through one of her past lives that she was a famous writer. And for confidentiality purposes, I can't give too much away, but she was a famous writer. And we researched this famous writer after her session. And she discovered that as this famous writer, she wrote a play, and the play was a very, very unusual female's name. And in this life, my client had called her own daughter this very unusual female name.
Yeah,
So,
these
you know,
things.
they do kind of like travel across lives. And also, I think, you know, people quite often after a session, when the ego has an opportunity to get involved, and I'm not there, I'm not with the person anymore, and they listen to their recording, and quite often people, and actually this happened to me, I did exactly the same thing, so I can relate to it, that because the things that come up in your past lives can often be things that resonate with you in this life, subject matters that you find of particular interest. When you see those subjects coming up in previous lives, the ego can get involved and say, well, you made that up because you already know this stuff because you've investigated it in this life. That's not true. The reason why you've investigated it in this life is because it was
Yeah.
part of past life for you. And people get those two things kind of like twisted round. And
Yeah, it's like, because that ego voice, like I said in my course, you have the intuitive voice that knows everything, that feels everything, that is in connection with source energy. And then that's the first voice you hear, and that's the voice that is connected to source. But then you have the ego, and like a few seconds after that intuitive voice started talking, you have that ego that's like, no, you're just making stuff up, blah 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 blah. And then you judge yourself, and what happens is it's going to grow stronger, and that intuitive voice is going to fade away.
yeah,
And that's why people say, oh, I can't be intuitive, I can't whatever. But it's because you are putting a block there, you're putting that block in place. But you are intuitive, your natural state is intuitive.
yeah, exactly. And when my clients, you know, this does come up for people afterwards. Normally, the next few days after having a session, they'll contact me and say, I feel like I made all that up. And I'll say, I know, because I felt that way too when I had my session. So I understand completely where you're coming from. But I'll also tell you, you didn't make it up. I promise you didn't make it up, because the emotions attached to what you saw were so powerful that you weren't lying there in hypnosis making this stuff up. It was coming from your subconscious, from your long-term memory bank, basically. And I also try and get people to think about what feels best. You know, when you tell me you think you've made it up, or the other option is these were my past lives and I believe in them, which one feels best? When you say I think I made it up, does not feel good. But when you say, okay, I get that, I understand the reasons for being shown those, that's positive, that feels good. And whatever feels good is always the right option. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, the same thing with now, with all the spiritual awakening stuff, with the energies. We have all kinds of, like, we just have a lot of energies that are basically being sent down to planet Earth right now. But what happens is we have a lot of stories that are out of alignment, and we have a lot of stories that are in alignment, but all of those are floating around on the internet. And then we have these newly awakened people that are trying to get as much information as they can. And what are they doing? They're going outside of themselves, seeking information, like, oh my God, there's more to life than I thought there was. Let me read everything I can. Because like the other day, I got a text from somebody, and she sent me this long text that she found online, and it was from the Pleiadian Collective. I'm like, okay, Pleiadian Collective, well, let's read this. Because she's like, well, you're familiar with the Pleiadian frequency because I have several Pleiadian guides, spirit guides, and I channel Pleiadians. So she's like, okay, read this. But it was like the foundation of the whole text was fear. And keeping you in fear, because all these disasters that, and I started reading, and what happens with me, that's what I told her too. The last couple of months, when my spirit guides don't want me to focus on something, I literally can't read it. Like it's like my vision gets blurry and I can't read it. I can't get myself to read it, or with a video, I just can't focus on the video. And then another video I can perfectly focus on, and it's like, why is this happening? And my guides were like, it's because you're not supposed to see this. This is not in alignment with your truth. And so I start reading this text, and I have to force myself to read it, but my vision, somehow I can't read it. And then I finally managed to kind of read it, and I tell her, that's not something that feels right. This feels fearful. This makes me not want to move. This makes me feel afraid. That is not something that I know to be Pleiadian. Pleiadians operate from a heart-based, higher frequency. They would not want to scare you.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh my God, I'm so relieved you told me that. I'm like, but how were you feeling when you were reading this text? How did it make you feel? Yeah. And if something makes you feel scared or constricted or fearful, then let it be. Just don't read it, don't do it, and walk away from it and go within.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. And I think, we have to follow what feels right for us, and that goes for everything. In our lives. You have the opportunity to feel into something, and you have the opportunity to ask yourself what feels good. And the thing that feels good will be the thing that you need to go for. I mean, there are times when we can feel anxiety around taking a step into something new. And that's a different kind of feeling. That's a feeling of the unknown, when we have to try something new, because we need to take that step in order to continue to grow. That doesn't feel like fear. That just feels like the unknown. It's a completely different feeling to something that makes you feel sick in your stomach. Your whole solar plexus is just like not comfortable. And it's the same thing, when I'm with clients, the feeling that they get around being with me and doing this work and coming into the studio and having a chat, it's really positive. And people often say to me at the end of it, oh my God, I wished it wasn't over. Where at the beginning they're thinking 6 hours is quite long, because the feeling around the work is so special and so positive. And anyone that ever has worries about, whether they're going to be able to be hypnotized, what it's going to feel like, what they're going to see, that stuff just goes. And it's not important. It's not the feeling of knowing that there's a positive change ahead is what's really important. And that's what people feel when they're with me. So I get the feeling thing completely.
Yeah, it's something that children, they are still more naturally connected to the subconscious mind, and we should actually try to teach this, like in schools. We should teach children how to use the subconscious mind so that they can still use it when they're adults, so that they don't have all these blocks, and so that they don't have to get all the therapy. But of course, until we've reached that point, QHHT is a great option to really dive into the subconscious and into past lives and multidimensional lifetimes, because yeah, that's what I love about Dolores, that she explored everything. Her books, she has books on all kinds. She has books on Jesus and the Essenes, then she has the Nostradamus books, she has the Keepers of the Garden and the Custodians and all that stuff, and the Convoluted Universe books. She just talks about everything, the nature of the universe, the extraterrestrial stuff, all of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, one of my favorite books that she's written is Between Death and Life.
Oh yeah, that one too. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
That has to be my favorite. Because, you know, since I was 10, I've had an understanding of connection with spirit. When I was 10, my best friend's sister died, and her mother took her to see a medium. And I remember my best friend came to school the next day and told me that she'd seen this lady and that she'd connected with her sister who'd passed. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. And I completely knew that that was possible. And from that moment, I just knew that that was something that I could do. And I think that for me, there's been this understanding of how if you've passed, it doesn't mean that you're not able to be connected with anymore. Death itself held a fascination for me, not in a morbid way, but in a way of, I need to understand this process. I need to understand what it means when we stop breathing. Where do we go? What do we learn? And I suppose for all of my life, it's been an absolute fascination for me, reading, and I've always seen mediums, and I've always connected with my own past relatives, especially my nan, who came up in my reading when you did that. And so for me, the whole way that Dolores writes, when she's writing, when she's communicating with spirit, it holds such a lot of comfort, because I understand the language. You know, when spirit is talking, I understand where the energy is, what it actually means, how completely correct it all is, and how there's no error for question. When spirit guides us, it guides us definitely. There's no deviation. It's like, this is my definite answer. I'm not going to flower it up. I'm not going to embellish it. You know, I'm telling you the truth. And so when I read that book, I was just like, yeah, I get that, because when I'm connecting, that's how I feel when I read this book. So yeah, but I haven't read all the books. I do need to do that when I've got time.
Yeah, there's I think I read the first Convoluted Universe book, but there's 3 of them, I think. So I still have book 2 and book 3, and the Nostradamus ones, I read the first one, but there's 2, I think. And I read Jesus and the Essenes, They Walked with Jesus, the Keepers of the Garden, and the Custodians. I'm reading that now. Yeah. Well, on Audible, listening to it on Audible. There are, and then Between Death and Life, or Life and Death. Yeah, I read that one a while ago. Yeah, and I know she has other books too. She had like her first 5 lives, or A Soul Remembers Hiroshima or something.
Yeah.
That one, I still have to read that one. That's one of her first books, I think.
You've read a lot. Well, she's written 26 books.
Oh, I still have a lot to go then. Okay.
There are a lot. But it's just really comforting for me. And I think, you know, discovering this work and discovering Dolores, it provides me with such a lot of comfort, because people get concerns about not understanding what life is about. They become confused when they can only see life in one way. and they haven't had the opportunity to understand what life is really about. And life only has one real purpose, and that's for us to learn. Our soul evolution is the only reason that we're here. You know, we come down here, we make a choice to come to this really dense planet because we can do so much learning, because we can do more learning here than we can do anywhere else. So we pass, we go back, we become energetic frequency, and then we do all the learning and we read the textbooks. But it's like being a hairdresser without having a haircut to do. You know, you can read the theory of that stuff. You can read all about how to cut hair, but unless you have hair to cut, you can't practice how to cut hair. And that's basically what we're here for. When we're a soul, when we're in spirit, we're doing our thing, we're learning, but then we choose to come back here because we feel as though we need to learn more. There's purposes and learning that we haven't fulfilled previously. And when people get to understand that this life is given to us specifically and we chose it, we need to remember that we all chose our lives. We chose exactly what we were going to experience before we came here. And that's not always easy for people to understand. When they're going through something tough, if you explain to them that the experiences you're going through now are so that you can learn, that's hard for people. But if you can help them to understand the simplistic learning, you know, you're going through those experiences because perhaps you need to learn how to forgive. Perhaps you need to learn how to be loved. Perhaps you need to learn how to love. When you have the opportunity to look at life from that perspective, I'm here to learn, these experiences have been given to me to learn, you can embrace them in a completely different way. And they don't need to become negative. They are very positive then. And I think that if people can understand that, it gives everyone that opportunity to really take life, you know, to the biggest place that they can, to really experience everything that they can experience. And that's what it's all about. And I would just like everyone to understand that.
Yeah, and we have soul contracts with all the people that are in our lives. We have contracts with these people, and
Yeah.
they're all soulmates. And that's what I see too, because like in my work with the Akashic Records, people will ask me, okay, I have this person or this person in my life, and the relationship is tense or good or whatever the relationship may be. And they wonder, like, where does this connection come from? Where do we know each other from originally? How are we connected? Like, and I will see when I focus on their energy, they like spirit shows me a pyramid, like kind of a pyramid. And
Okay.
there you can see the levels of connection, like how far or close are you connected to this other person.
Yeah.
And then they'll show me what the lessons are, the contract basically that they
Okay.
have. Those, like me and my ex-husband, I could, if I was not aware of the fact that we agreed in contract, an energetic contract, to teach each other things. And
Yeah.
the marriage was like a classic toxic marriage with
Yeah.
like the codependent person, the narcissist. And we had a very chaotic marriage. We split up. And but I realized, because that was the trigger for my spiritual awakening basically.
Yeah.
So, and I saw everything from this higher perspective. I saw the soul contract. I saw why everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. I learned a lot from that relationship. But of course, if I chose to just not look at any of that, I could have kept on being bitter. I could have stayed angry. I could have been projecting onto him, oh, you did this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But I know that on a soul level, I asked for him to treat me the way he did because I needed to learn all kinds of stuff. I needed to learn to set boundaries. I needed to learn to stand up for myself. I needed to learn how strong I was. And if he would not have done any of the things he did, I would have never been the person that I am today.
Yeah, yeah. Were you have you guys got karma? Were you together in a previous life?
Yeah, because that's the thing. That's how I started with the Akashic records. I suddenly started seeing all of my own past lives spontaneously. Like there was a moment where we were in conversation, me and him were standing talking to each other in the kitchen. And all of a sudden it's like time stopped and everything slowed down. It was really strange. And like in slow motion, everything became like slow motion. And it's like he wasn't aware that time was stopping. And suddenly everything changed. Like the atmosphere changed, the surroundings, the room we were in changed, and we changed. And suddenly it's like I had this inner knowing that I'm in this other lifetime.
Yeah.
And like it felt like I was in a different time and he was a different, and like there was a similar situation. It triggered the remembrance of a similar situation in that past life.
Okay, yeah.
And then I saw how we were connected, how my daughter was connected to us, how we were all connected, and the karma that we had to work out. All of that was shown, and then I understood everything. I'm like, okay, it all makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's and having that experience is so powerful, isn't it? Because again, it's like one of those puzzle pieces that gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I've got this information now, I understand. So there's, it comes up a lot. Dolores talked a lot about karma, and we look for connections with people that have existed in our past lives who exist for us now. So for example, for me, my parents now in this life used to be brother and sister, and I used to be the mum. And it's very interesting because I kind of still am the mum in this life now. It's almost as we know that we'd have looked at our lives previously and we'd have thought, okay, maybe we screwed that relationship up a little bit. Next time you come back, you be the child and we'll be the parents, and we're going to see if we can do this any better.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how we get to see those kind of, I call them regurgitated relationships.
It's the same thing now with my daughter and my boyfriend. They are they used to be brother and sister.
Okay.
And now they're stepdad and daughter, but he's known her since she was 3 years old. So to her, it's just her dad. She doesn't know any better. But they will argue sometimes like brother and sister. And I'm sitting there, I'm observing it. Like I'm just sitting there like, do you realize that you sound like brother and sister? And then they'll start joking and they'll start like picking at each other, like back and forth, like typical siblings, like sibling behavior. I'm like, this is so weird.
Yeah, it's interesting, but a big part of what Dolores has taught us is that it's our job as QHHT practitioners to help people to understand the wheel of karma, and to help people to understand that if they are having a tricky time in a relationship now, that relationship would have been given to them exactly like you said with your ex-husband for a reason. But there's also a big part of just making good as best you can that relationship, even after it's fallen apart, as best you can. Create as much positive feeling around that relationship as you possibly can. Because if it's been particularly tricky, if it's been particularly toxic and difficult, if you don't resolve it, if you don't make it as good as it possibly can be, you are just going to come back and do that relationship again. And it will become more and more and more difficult until you learn to work it out. And so that's our responsibility as QHHT practitioners, to help people to understand, we need to take responsibility for the relationships that we're in and put them together as best we can.
Yeah, that's what I realized too. After that relationship, I'm like, okay, I was meant to dissolve this huge block, this karmic block in this lifetime with this person. This is the lifetime that we were meant to solve all of that.
Yeah.
And lucky for me now, because one of the two has to start, has to change the attitude and has to be forgiving. It's about forgiving the other person, but also forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
And once I made the first move to being forgiving, like now we can talk and we can, well, saying we're friends is maybe an overstatement, but we can be polite and we can have a normal civil conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so now you're off that wheel of karma, you guys.
And we can, like, he's in the US and I'm in Belgium, because we used to live together in the US, of course, but then I moved back here. But there's going to be a time where we will visit, where my daughter's going to be visiting, and we will just have a normal conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm not I have no more anger. I don't have any of that, because it doesn't serve me to stay angry. It doesn't serve me to be sad or whatever. It's not part of my reality anymore.
No, exactly. And what we also need to remember is, if we do continue to live in an emotional state of anger or an emotional state of frustration, or what I always call the dark emotions. I don't like to say negative because they do have a place. But if we want to stay with a dark emotion, we will become physically affected by that. So the body will start to give us messages when we're sitting in a place of constant anger or constant frustration or constant fear or constant disappointment, the dark emotions. And the body will give us a little message in the form of a sensation. You'll start to get a backache, or as Julia Cannon has her soul speak, and every area of the body relates to an emotion. So if you had for example, if I had a client who came to me who was having constant throat issues, then I would be looking for something in their life which was stopping them from speaking their truth. Somewhere in their life they weren't having the opportunity to say what they needed to say. So the throat gives them sensation, because it's the only way that it can give a message to say, for you to emotionally heal, you need to take a look at what you're not speaking about. So it's very important for us, when we do feel that we're sitting in a kind of a dark emotion constantly, that it will begin to physically affect us. And there's 100% connection between how we emotionally are and how we physically are.
Yeah, it's like Louise Hay. She has her books. What are they titled again? You Can Heal Your Life, I think.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that when I had something like I had a cold or I had this or that, I would go into the book and see, okay, what does this mean? And at first I'm like resistant, like, no, I'm not struggling with this or that, blah, blah, blah. But then once you start to acknowledge, okay, that's what this means. This is the energy that manifested as a cold, as this or as that. And then you can start to work on the problem, and then the moment you acknowledge it, that's when you can start to heal it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Exactly. And that's why hypnosis can create healed responses, physical responses in the body. I mean, Dolores had amazing results. Healing cancer, healing broken bones. We all know about Joe Dispenza, who we put his whole spine back together just through the mind, through repairing it through his mind. And so we know the mind-body connection is very, very powerful. And that's why, as soon as we can release, like you said, an emotion, as soon as you release that emotion, your body gets the opportunity to heal, because it doesn't need to be giving you that message anymore. I think over time, in much more primitive lives, we would have thought this way, we would have understood this. But now we don't think about how we're emotionally feeling. as being a connection to how we're physically feeling. And I think it's something that we need to start acknowledging a lot more, and we can create such a more healthy society if people understood that their emotional state is connected to their physical state. You can't separate the two.
No, and yeah, more and more people are going to start to realize that. So yeah, I'm definitely excited about the future and people getting to know QHHT. And even though Dolores Cannon is no longer with us physically, I feel that a lot of people are still gonna get to know her, a lot more people. And yeah, I can't wait to see what the future holds.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you for choosing to do this with me as well. It's been lovely.
Yeah, it was really, even though I already knew a little bit about QHHT, it was really interesting to hear from an insider what it's like to be a QHHT practitioner and just to learn more about QHHT. And you also have your interview series on YouTube, right? You have interviews?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple, I've got about 3 to edit at the moment. So there's one online at the moment with a previous client, and she talks about her past lives. I've got 3 others that I've recorded that I need to do the editing for. But yeah, they're basically behind the scenes videos. So they are from the client's perspective, because I can bang on about this work forever. But I think it's really important for people to see it from the perspective of the person who's gone through it. So I've got people describing what they saw in their past lives, what it was like when I connected with their higher self, and more about how their lives have changed after the sessions. So that is called Quantum Convos, and that's on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm also going to mention all of your website, your Instagram, and all your where everyone can find you. I'm going to mention all of that in the description, and your YouTube channel, so they can go and subscribe to your YouTube channel for all the interviews. And anyone that is in your area, the Brighton area in the UK, you definitely have to go check out her sanctuary and book a session, because I know that it's going to be a life-changing experience, definitely.
Thank you so much, Deborah. It's been amazing chatting to you.
Yeah, I really had a great time. That is it for this week, and I am so glad that you decided to tune in and join us for this episode. And you can connect with Georgina and her QHHT work on her social media and her website and her YouTube channel, and all details will be mentioned below in the description box. And I'd love it if you commented so we can keep the conversation going, and share this with anyone who it may help on their journey. And if you are interested in donating to the channel, so that I can keep my episodes up and running and going for you. And if that is something that you feel called to do, I would definitely appreciate it and accept it with love. And I'll mention those details below. If you want to stay up to date on all the podcast episodes, make sure to go to anchor.fm/mystical tea time. There you can find all available podcast links such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more, or just listen by subscribing on YouTube. And in between podcast episodes, I also post regular, shorter videos on IGTV on Instagram. So follow me there if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.